We're covering the Second Coming today, and I'm so excited because we're joined by a very special guest, none other than the Reverend Zach Copeland Green. Wait, what?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here, Louis.
Can you
to grace your podcast with my holiness?
You've got a lot of explaining to do, Zach. I didn't. Let's start first off. Are you even like Christian?
No, I'm an atheist who's ethnically Jewish. So no, I couldn't be further from. I could be further from being a Christian, but I'm not a Christian. But I am actually ordained by the openministry.com. And actually, funnily enough, I know you don't like letting the audience peek behind the curtain, Louis, but it is exactly a week ago today was the eight-year anniversary of me being ordained because I was procrastinating instead of revising for my GCSEs. And I thought that would be a fun thing to do. So I'm here to offer some religious guidance as we talk about the second coming of Jesus today.
Okay. Second question: who ordained you? How did that?
I filled in a form. And that was it. And then you get sent an email saying, if you'd like the certificate, that'll be $20, please. You can't do anything without the certificate. So I can't do anything, unfortunately, other than...
Jesus Christ, no wonder the Son of God came back. Hello and welcome to Davis on Davis. This is a podcast all about the work of Russell T Davies. And when you're listening to this, Pride Month is coming to an end. You know, it's nearly over. And to celebrate that, we're finally going to stop talking about gay shit.
Woohoo. That wasn't supposed to be that wasn't a woohoo as in stop talking about gay stuff.
We happen to be talking about the first show on this podcast that isn't about a bunch of gay people being gay.
Yeah.
I am Louis Davis. I'm joined by Zach Copeland Green.
Hello.
And we have a guest today, an actual guest.
It's me, Joe Brennan, from the Joe Brennan YouTube channel.
Joe Brennan off the telly, wow.
I wasn't sure whether I should speak before I was introduced, because whenever I listen to a podcast and there's someone who's not yet been introduced and there's just a weird third voice that's not usually there, I get uncomfortable. So I was like, I'm going to hold my tongue until it's my turn to speak.
No, I always find that funny, like just hearing that, oh yeah, someone has been like waiting patiently for 7 minutes while the other two sort of chat shit. So I wanted to...
No, I was happy to just let you riff for as long as was appropriate.
I didn't want to drag it out too long, but yeah, welcome, Joe. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Tell us a bit about what you do.
I make YouTube videos every week these days, often about Doctor Who. To be honest, too often about Doctor Who, but that tends to be what gets me the views. I like to talk about other things. In my heart, I'm a Star Wars fan, but yeah, it's kind of... I don't know how to describe the kind of stuff I do. It used to be very scripted video essay stuff. I'm trying to move more into a little looser, a little lighter, a little less hard work, but we'll see.
I just want to go on record and saying I absolutely love Joe's videos. And if you're looking for concise, nuanced analysis of science fiction, go watch the Joe Boys channel.
Well, look at that.
Yes, and I want to go on record and say I've been a fan of Joe since TARDIS posting, since I discovered you through TARDIS posting. It's the best Doctor Who Facebook meme group.
Yeah, I don't think we have much competition, but it's nice to be the best. It's it's weird that it's the biggest, and it is funny that my origin through this whole thing is Facebook memes. But it makes me a bit unique when it comes to all the other Doctor Who faces.
No, it's weird. There was like a period where like this was well after Facebook had been like sort of deemed uncool, and yet Facebook groups were still pretty good. I think they've gotten worse now, but like there was this sort of...
Yeah, I think so.
I guess renaissance for like Facebook groups and like Facebook meme groups where like, okay, sure, the Roman Empire of Facebook has collapsed to this point, but somehow we're bringing it back. But I think now that's also over.
Yeah, I think around like 2017, 2018, it was kind of this weird thing where culturally Gen Z had completely migrated from Facebook or never even touched it, and younger millennials the same. But I think for some reason in these weird pockets of fandom, it was the place to be, and it was a kind of a more cool place to be fandom-wise than like Twitter in these very kind of specific pockets, some of which I created, but some I was just riding the coattails of. So
it was also the place to be. So we both went to Cambridge, and this isn't going to contribute to any level of coolness, but like I think you had like CamFest, the Fest page for. Yeah, I think CamFest was the original Fest page. I think all the other ones were based off of it.
that's a good claim.
We used to tell freshers on their first day, get a Facebook account, and they would look at you like you just told them to get MySpace. I was going to say, compared to I recently joined Star Trek shit posting, and I was disappointed by the lack of lore that has as a shit posting group. There's no equivalent of Skongo as far as I can see.
You need things to just be buried under multiple layers of inaccessible, probably at a certain point not very funny lore that, just ties the whole thing together, and, posting memes that, unless you were around 6 years ago for some stupid joke among like 200 people, you don't stand a chance of understanding.
Yeah, I think for listeners who are a bit confused, imagine Glub Shitto, but with like an actual backstory created.
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of Skongo kind of that kind of pretending a character exists has propped up a fair amount since Skongo. Like there's
Graggle Simpson.
There's the fake Graggle Simpson who was Gumbly Simpson on different social medias. There was a Mario character that people pretended was in like the files called Scrupulous Fingor, and like there was all this like, oh, here's what he would look like in Mario 64. Here's what he would look like in, and I just look at that and just go, well, we got to that first, but.
It's just
fantastic. We're talking about history right here with Joe Brennan.
Wow. Well, without further ado, because these episodes are 70 minutes long, which is quite a bit longer than we normally cover on this show. We normally do like 35 to 45-minute episodes of television. We're talking today about the first episode of The Second Coming. This was originally planned to be a 4-part series of hour slot, so like 45-minute long episodes, but then they decided instead to make 2 episodes which are 70 minutes long if you don't include adverts. It's kind of interesting that it means that The Second Coming is in 2 parts, but also you think maybe should it be 3 parts because of a trinity? I don't know. It's
essentially a movie. It's a 2-part movie. And it's listed on Letterboxd as such. I knew because I went and checked, but then so is Bob and Rose, for instance, which is certainly not a movie. So I think it's the closest we've got to having an RTD movie, if you discount the Coronation Street Viva Las Vegas movie.
Yeah,
which I am.
I'm sure we'll cover that someday. We only have to do 1 episode on it.
I think that's fair enough.
So this came out in 2003. So it's following on from Bob and Rose at the end of 2001. And it's notably, I think, about a couple of months before RTD was announced to be taking over Doctor Who. And I'm bringing that up because I need to initiate, Joe. The one rule of this podcast is we don't talk about Doctor Who. But of course, we all know that rules are made to be broken.
Yeah, it's like if you know the rules of vexillology.
I don't.
Well, there are 5 rules about how to make a good flag, but if you follow all of them, your flag is really boring. So I'm of the opinion that you should always break at least 1.
Right.
And we only have 1 rule.
So you got to break at least one of the 1 rule. I'm getting the culture here. I understand.
Yeah.
Because when RTD was announced to be taking over Doctor Who, the first thought of a lot of people, and I think of a lot of a certain kind of people seemingly, was, oh my God, Doctor Who's going to be gay, because they saw Queer as Folk and was like, oh my God, we're going to have a gay Doctor Who. I think they actually should have watched The Second Coming, because I'm going to unravel over the next however long this podcast episode is going to be, unravel my thesis that this is an episode of Doctor Who without the Doctor in it.
Of course, I'm sure there were some people who watched Casanova and was like, "Oh my God, Doctor Who's going to be super straight now." Yeah, there's going to be no third Doctor, Master, unwritten longing gayness.
Well, I'm sure when we get to Casanova, my thesis will be that's season 2 of Doctor Who. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Of course, we invited Joe on because we wanted a Doctor Who expert. We wanted someone, but also we wanted someone who actually has really good takes about Doctor Who.
They couldn't find one, so I agreed to step in. Classic.
I think what we love is that you don't focus on stuff that doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's
because it's easy to go, oh my God, Richard E. Grant, the glub shitter of the Doctor Who universe. and focus on that in your review. But actually, no.
I dedicated a couple of minutes to it. But yeah, no, I think I find myself out of step a little with general fandom priorities when it comes to storytelling, and I think that not deliberately, but sets me apart a little. So if that's in a good way, I welcome that.
Yeah. I mean, I know, because like I've noticed, like I don't really do fandom. Someone I was with until recently, like they did not do any kind of pop culture. Basically, they were not really into pop culture. They were not really into like food. They were not really into music. They were into planes and I'm into trains, so we made it work. But I was sort of like, yeah, I mean, Doctor Who is the only thing I'm into, because you don't have to like the show to be a fan of it. I was like, I could never get into Star Wars, because like when they do something different, I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. And then they'd be like, no, you have to do the Joseph Campbell's. I'm like, no. And so I kind of realized, like, yeah, I don't have fandom brained priorities, I guess.
I think it's a good way to be. I think it gets in the way of a lot of things that I would say matter more, but
I just want to be. Yeah. I just want to enjoy the next 45 minutes of my life.
I do have to say, watching The Second Coming, I was trying, especially at the start, to put to one side the kind of Doctor Who fan brain, the not even knowing the rule of this podcast, but I didn't want to sound like a guy who's watched Doctor Who and then, does the whole... one of my least favourite types of post is if there's a prestige movie that's getting Oscars or something, like... Poor Things, and someone tweeted about that. That's like, oh my god, it's Gwen Stacy, the Hulk, and the Green Goblin in one movie. And then, like, as a fan of Doctor Who, watching the opening scene of Second Coming, I was like, don't notice all these people. Don't notice where I've seen them before.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you have to like Emma Stone because she was in Easy A. Yeah. She was in that thing with Nathan Fielder. She was in Maniac with Jonah Hill. You have to like her because she's done good stuff, not because of...
I think I've ended up going the other way, in that I've consumed so much Russell T Davies content that I watch Doctor Who now and go, this is just this man doing the same thing with the same people again and again and again, which I think is probably true of everyone that works in the industry. You've got your friends that you trust and and so you just keep casting Leslie Sharp as your leading lady. Louis, you said you wanted to enjoy the next 45 minutes. Joe, you said you didn't want to let unnecessary things get in the way. Shall we get rolling with actually talking about The Second Coming Part 1?
Yes. So first thing I should say is, in this program, there's a lot of location indicators, like little titles with location. They're always done in the like typewriter font, as if it's like a script writer. I don't know, maybe about something about the divine plan. God is a script writer from Swansea. We start off with our first sort of like location indicator is Brickwall Club, Manchester. We're in a club. Well, I mean, it's sort of more like a football club bar. You know when it's like a pub that's called a club because it's a sports thing,
no,
I think.
I have no idea.
No. It's not a nightclub. It's called club, but it's not a nightclub.
But it's familiar territory.
It's live music.
It's a parallel. I mean, maybe it's not, but it feels like a parallel to the opening scene of Bob and Rose.
Oh, 100%.
Where we see Leslie Sharp picking up pints in a
No,
pub.
it's the same. It's a guy doing the thing. It's parallel in that they do the same thing.
Yeah.
But instead, Leslie Sharp is actually sat down because we're following Christopher Eccleston.
Gosh.
Who's playing a guy who... I didn't catch his name until like half an hour into the program.
Yeah.
But it turns out his name is Steve. I was calling him Dan in my head. Steve carries 3 drinks. Obviously, 3 drinks, 2 hands. He's sort of like precariously holding a third drink between his like 2 middle fingers. Very precarious. A fight breaks out as he's trying to get the drinks there. There's a band playing. We just kind of watch the fight break out. He takes it to his table and he's with some friends who later on in the episode we find out their names are Pete and Judy, and the other one who's what's her name?
Her name is Fiona.
So you've got Pete, Judy, and Fiona. It's one of those Swedish names where it starts with a J.
I was going to say Judy is Leslie Sharp of Bob and Rose fame. And then notably, Peter is played by Ace Batty, who will show up again as Rani Chandra's dad in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yes.
And I don't know where I recognise Christopher Eccleston from.
I think I've seen him in a Thor movie, and I think that's probably the only thing he's done, and probably the thing he's most proud of. So.
I could make a joke now about you two being the worst kind of Doctor Who fans. The ones that skip to series 2. My brain is poisoned by now that there's 2 runs of seasons and 1 run of series, and they're all different. I know you're fine with it, Zach. I just needed to mention that.
So we get a sense of the characters that we're dealing with. Steve, I think he's a loser a little bit. I don't know. I think the script wants him to be a loser.
Yeah.
You were nodding.
Yeah, it almost wants him to be more of a loser than he comes across as Christopher Eccleston, I think. Like, it's like, oh, he's got no qualifications, he's working in a video shop, and you see him and it's like, he seems like a charming enough young man. You know? But yeah, I think you're meant to get that sense. Because
Pete makes him ask like some girls if he can buy them a drink, and they laugh at him, and it feels almost disjointed with the reaction they give to him, because I think he seemed perfectly normal in asking them for a drink.
It's like the worst thing she can say is no, and it's just about 30 uninterrupted seconds of them laughing in his face. It's like, oh, that's rough.
We swiftly move on, and I think the thing to note, and this is going to make this beginning bit of the podcast quite tricky, is this is a much this is a faster paced script than we've seen before from RTD so far. There's much less sitting in a scene and watching characters interact. As Louis says, this is why we got these location markers.
Yeah.
We're going here, there, and everywhere. So now we're outside the club.
Yeah.
Obviously later in the night, where Christopher Eccleston is sat on the curb, and Leslie Sharp comes up to him, and they have a very short conversation.
Yeah, very short. It's like she's just like, I regret this night out. I want to do something to celebrate the divorce. We should do the video dating services. And always like, if we did that, they would just pair us together. So this is a thing from back in the old, when you would go to the service, pay the money, make a videotape of you talking about yourself, and then you'd get like matched up with people, and you'd go on dates. And it costs like 60 quid each. So they're saying, hey, let's save that amount of money and just, get together now, since it's inevitable. And so they kiss. And in that moment, he gets a bit spooked, and some ominous music starts playing.
Yeah.
And that's it. They stop kissing.
It's a lovely, mysterious moment of what's happening in this fella's head, because it's a strange... it's got the music plays in a way that you can't quite pin down what the moment actually is for him. And we find out more, don't we?
It did speak to me of a religious experience. That was, I mean, I know obviously going in, I'm expected to have a religious experience by watching this show. No, not really. I did think he was having a bit of a religious experience in that, where he looks up to the sky and then the camera sort of zooms out to integrate the quote unquote title sequence into the universe where Christopher Eccleston and Leslie Sharp's name appear. I don't want to say it, but there was something very, very Doctor Who about that. Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
So now we cut to 40 days later, and he's found on Saddleworth Moor in I presume Yorkshire, because firstly he gets taken to hospital in Leeds. Also, Moor is something the Yorkshire people will not stop yapping on about. They love the moors. It's like the only thing they've got going, apart from the puddings, of course. And so he's just sort of found there, like crawling onto a road, stopping a car. He's babbling. He's crazy. Guy asks him for his name, and I'm like, okay, good. We're gonna figure out what his name is, because we find in these shows there's always a lot of names you have to keep track of. And I'm like, okay, good. We can get his name, and then I can start using his name when I write the notes. What I actually did with the notes is, once I found his name, I went back through them and changed it, because before I was just saying like, the man does this, the man does that. And so the man says he's the son of God to this guy who finds him on the road.
I think it's hilarious that the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert that Jesus did becomes 40 days in the Yorkshire moors. I can imagine RTD at his computer going, ha ha ha, oh, that's so funny, ha 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 ha.
Yeah, and then we find out a bit later that he had, bags of pork pies and things with him, and I think the idea of Jesus doing the same and just prepping for his his time in the desert by grabbing some pork pies, I think, again, you're right, you can imagine the smugness of Russell.
The thing about the whole like turning one fish into 40 fish or whatever it was is you do have to start with a fish, you know what I mean? And like nowadays the pork pies, they always come in like 6 packs, so he wasn't going to turn one pork pie into a bunch of pork pies. That doesn't make any sense. He'd turn a bag of pork pies into a bunch of bags of pork pies.
I'd like to meet this fella. He sounds like he'd be useful to know.
So we've found out he's now whispering and babbling away that he's the son of God.
Yeah.
And he gets taken to a hospital in Leeds. And it's disconcerting how he's like unconscious in this hospital bed, but he's smiling away like a maniac.
Good for him. He's happy. What can you know?
Yeah, I don't want to take that away from him.
No.
I was looking at that thinking, wow, I'm glad he's all right, you know?
And we get this point where we meet the man's father, not God, but his earthly father, and we get a bit of... I notice this quite a bit, like when Judy, Leslie Sharp's character, mentions that she's recently divorced through conversation. There's a lot of semi-expositional conversation here where we find out that the man Steve's dad, Steve's mum, used to see things, have hallucinations, and then she committed suicide. So already we're going, oh gosh, not quite parallels with the New Testament, but okay, we're getting hints that, oh, was she visited by Gabriel? Did something happen there? Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we see some nurses crying in the hospital corridor. And there's just bloody Catholics. Bloody Catholics crying in the corridor, says one of the other guys in the hospital, because it turns out the Pope's dead.
You know, my sister used to have a weird obsession with the Pope, and not religious at all, just liked the pageantry of it. So, you know, they might just be that.
Yeah, just Pope stands rather than religious.
No, literally, Pope stands, literally. Part of it was also really embracing wholeheartedly the irony of sort of going into like a really beautiful Catholic church, and they always have like a gift shop with like plastic Pope merch, and how just always being, I always want to buy something. I don't want to get into a whole thing about it, but no shade to the Catholics yet. That's just how it was.
I'm going to Rome in 3 weeks. I'll bring you back a keyring, Lee.
Ah, lovely.
It's the tackiest thing you can find.
No, actually do that, and I will get it to my sister. That'll be so funny.
So this is the point where we've got religion in our head very much now. If you didn't already going into this program, we now see a pretty good looking young Rory Kinnear strutting down the hospital corridor.
Oh, he is strutting.
And he brings this sort of this sort of camera. It is a camera.
We should mention he's a priest.
He's a priest. Did I not mention he was a priest?
He's an attractive priest, you know, Andrew Scott Who.
This was the original hot priest, Rory Kinnear.
Yeah.
And he takes a picture of Christopher Eccleston, and then I am thinking at this point, how does he know that Christopher Eccleston's character is here? So already I'm asking these questions.
Yeah.
And this photo gets sent back to someone at the Vatican.
Yeah, I found that interesting because I didn't know what to expect from this show, and I wondered if they'd drag out a little longer and at a level of ambiguity as far as like, is this guy just a nutter? Is he just, this kind of guy who's had some sort of mental break that is then able to believe that he's this and get other people to believe that there's this?
No, exactly. I was thinking...
Very, very early on, they bring in these elements of like the Catholic Church, and there's this kind of prophecy situation, and like right from the start we're going, oh, actually there is more going on here than just a weird man. And I thought that was really interesting. They kind of dispel that ambiguity very, very quickly.
One of the like place titles is like Vatican City. Like this goes up to like the High Cardinals, you know. This rises through the ranks.
Which I think then maybe it's worth noting now how later on in a scene we'll see this usurped quite confidently by Steve. And it's almost because when you write something like this that's obviously so blatantly about religion, because that's what it is about, written by an atheist, and not to say that it's got an agenda in the modern sense that people love to throw the word agenda around and say everyone's pushing an agenda, but there's certainly a thesis that RTD is pushing with this script and saying the Catholic Church would want to take control, and then that wants to be usurped to say there's an issue with institutionalized religion. And I think that's why they're brought in so quickly, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I mean, we'll see it in the conversation that Steve ends up having with the hot priest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And also when he photographs this new Jesus, he sort of wakes up, looks at him menacingly, and he runs off. Just a little detail there. But anyway, we then cut to Crush Bar in Manchester. And now we've got a new character, a guy named Johnny Tyler. And he's calling over to someone, he's saying, Judy, it's me, Johnny Tyler. So immediately we establish that, okay, so the woman from, 40 days earlier is Judy, and this guy is Johnny. And her first remark is that he looks different to his videotape, so we can tell that, oh, okay, so he's from the dating service. In the man's 40-day absence, she sort of got on with her life to some extent and decided to just do the dating service anyway.
Which is interesting. Do you buy that?
Yeah, because you just got divorced. And your friend has gone missing.
Yeah, I don't know about grief, because they seem to all assume he was dead. So to kind of, I have no idea how quickly you then get back on the horse. But it's, I guess it's what needed to happen for this angle.
I mean, the statistics about going missing and like the likelihood of being found as time goes on is genuinely depressing. Thing is, we need to introduce him for the plot because he is a fairly important character, so you just have to suspend your disbelief a bit. Maybe this is one of the miracles.
Well, I think that is by putting the 40 days into the Yorkshire Moors, not only is funny, but it injects it with that sense of realism that makes you go, the likelihood of you surviving 40 days and 40 nights in the Yorkshire Moors once you go missing is a bizarre concept.
Yeah.
When you think about those statistics.
Also, would you meet people on the moors? Like,
you'd meet people you don't want to meet on the moors.
Yeah.
As
like the Son of Christ. The Son of God.
I was going to say,
brother of Christ.
As a northerner, I was always told to stay away from the moors.
Is that just because of anti-Yorkshire sentiment, or like?
No, because of the Yorkshire Ripper and murders on the moors.
Oh, okay.
Not that I live anywhere near a moor.
It's funny having a murder in like quite a sparsely populated area. Like, you have to get a lot of petrol to like even commit one murder, and there's not a lot of places to like jump out of.
It's poor planning, I think. You could cover a lot more ground if you moved it further into a city.
But isn't like Hound of the Baskervilles, that's set not in the Yorkshire Moors, but isn't that set on the moors?
Are there moors outside of Yorkshire?
Like the Devon Moors, Devonshire Moors?
Okay, yeah, but possibly, yeah.
We're doing more chat than I expected.
Yeah.
There's a Beast of Bodmin Moor. That's an old like cryptid kind of story. I'm trying to think of anything I know beyond just the name. Couldn't tell you what sort of beast. Couldn't tell you where the moor is. But
there's more moors.
There's moors.
The funniest thing happens on the moors. Not on the moors. The funniest thing happens in the bar. Judy gets a phone call and finds out that Steve is in hospital and is like, oh my God, he's in hospital. Wow. And so she says, oh my God, my friend's in hospital. I've got to go. And then he doesn't believe her. And like Johnny Tyler has obviously been watching Queer as Folk because, he hears someone say, oh, someone's in hospital. I've got to go, and does not believe it. That is such a common thing in like Queer as Folk, and so I thought it's so funny, but like the one time that it's actually what's happening, the one time it's actually real, just does not believe her.
I don't know if I would just be more gullible in certain situations, but in that one I was like, I know it's a classic excuse, but this feels a very kind of a very like believable example of this excuse. Like, it seems, she gets very specific very quickly. It feels like a real phone call.
Well, yeah, she says like she's been missing for 6 weeks. Technically 2 days less than 6 weeks, but we'll allow it.
She references that he's been in the news, but I can almost
yes, in the news.
I can almost imagine someone though picking a random news story and trying to say, "Oh, I'm their best friend," as an excuse. I don't know if that makes it more or less believable, but certainly at that moment, you feel for Johnny.
Yes, and then 2 seconds later, you stop feeling for him because as she's leaving, he yells "bitch" at her. It's like "bitch." Not even saying it under his breath, like a good Englishman. No, he wants her to hear. Yeah. So she's going to her car. She's calling her friend to find out which hospital, but her friend is like, "Oh no, I don't need to drive all the way there because it's like Leeds." So she doesn't. That's kind of the end of that.
So this friend that she phones, I think is Fiona.
Fiona, yeah.
If I will criticise the script, there are far too many characters. I know we've joked about before on the podcast there being lots of characters with lots of different names.
Yeah.
But at least all the characters serve purposes. Here, I'm kind of saying Fiona with her husband and her children. I mean, I've purposely not watched part 2 yet, but you feel in this first part, they do sort of clutter the episode quite a bit, I found.
Fiona could be someone in the bar at the start but so it's kind of quite like a busy kind of hectic scene. But Fiona just seems to like be like Pete, but without like characterization. So it's just if Pete's in it a bit too much, we can have Fiona do something, you know.
I can't say I felt that necessarily about Fiona, and I think the husband's called Dave. I kind of felt that bringing a couple of kind of seemingly very level-headed people into the mix, in kind of, I guess the others are all forced to take kind of an extreme stance, and I think we'll talk about that a little more later on, but I kind of felt that presence of, you know, two people that seem incredibly normal in the face of everything, that didn't hurt it. And I actually made a note that I was glad he didn't have 12 friends of disciples, and I thought it's quite nice that they have narrowed it down to just the essential ones. But it's interesting hearing that you felt that even the, you know, reduced number of his disciples was cluttered. Yeah.
I kind of feel you have Judy feels very unique in her characterization and her conflict with Steve as the episode goes out. And then I'm struggling to see the uniqueness in the other characters.
Yeah, like Judy kind of fills a role of like Mary Magdalene, and I'm guessing Judas. Like, I feel like there's sort of, she could be either of those kind of people as like a parallel, because she's a non-believer, so, you know, is she going to betray him or what? And also she's definitely the love interest, so
definitely.
No, I was very proud of myself when I found out that Rani's dad from Sarah Jane was called Pete. I was like, oh, I know that one, that's Bible. But then it was a lot later that I was like, oh, Judith, that sounds like Judas. That was something that had completely passed me by until like the final 10 minutes.
I don't know if there was a Fiona in the Bible, and I think David was a few hundred years out.
Just biblical adjacent names.
Yeah.
Johnny. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Johnny Tyler.
So we end up back at the hospital, and now the priest has got an army of police officers with him. And apparently the Italian government has called in some favours with the UK government.
We're on some Interpol shit.
Which it feels very Dan Brown at this point.
No, I thought it was funny, but like, yes, the Italian government. Yeah, definitely the Italians.
Yeah, what pull does the Vatican have over the Italian government? I mean,
well, exactly. The next thing you know, the Sammarinese will be wanting some favours from the British police as well.
So they rock up to Steve's bed, and he's gone. He is gone.
So they break into his house on Harris Street in Manchester. That's one of the cards. So we know where he lives. He lives on Harris Street. They look through his stuff. We see a lot of pictures. You know, we see young Steve. We see adult Steve. We see Steve's friends. They take a hair sample. I think you're talking about like the fast pace of like, we need to sort of flesh out all these people really, really quickly. Like, here you go. Like, it's sort of a montage of just rifling through his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost think that was an interesting way of... it's almost going, this is a man who has existed before all this. He's got a history that is real, and he's not just this entity that has kind of appeared from nothing. Not that I think that was particularly up in the air, but I think it's kind of this guy has very much grown up a human being, a very ordinary one. And I guess it's good to have that in a kind of concrete sense.
Especially as we get so little time before he has this religious experience. Because if you could do this as an 8-episode series and have a full, well, maybe not 8, but I can imagine you'd have a full episode 1 of just him, and then that could be your end of episode 1 hook of him having this religious experience and showing up at the beginning of episode 2. But we just don't have the screen time, so it's a shortcut.
Yeah. So as they're leaving the house, Steve is actually like standing. You know, we see him in the background when Rory Kinnear walks out, and then we see him when Rory Kinnear like walks across a street, and then he's like at the back of the next street. And finally he spots him as he's about to get into his car. And so Steve does a finger on his lip to say shh, and they go to a cafe. A
nice old greasy spoon. And this is where we get our first proper dialogue with Steve being the son of God. And I think it's very striking in, you expect him to be holier than thou, but he is your Salford lad through and through, eating his greasy breakfast.
Yeah, no, I was really struck by that. The sense that kind of, even after he gains this kind of importance and not all-knowing, but he's got this burden and this knowledge and this purpose, that the fact that he's still got this kind of humour and this edge to him, he's got this kind of Christopher Eccleston-ness, this northernness, and he's got all this stuff that hasn't just vanished overnight when he became realised he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
And I think, the justification that he then gets into about, he's not omniscient. He can't know everything. He's not God. He is a human, manifestation of that. And I think to really lean into the fact that being a human manifestation of that and a human vessel for which God's word can be spread, you keep the humanity there, and you kind of lean into that and remind us that he is still a human man. I think that's really interesting, and I think a really good choice.
I completely agree. And there's Steve brings up the idea of the word becoming flesh and God becoming man, and it almost knocks off your idea of maybe this is what Jesus was like. Maybe Jesus was your average bloke from off the corner. Although you do have stories of him being a teenage boy and going and harassing all the priests in the temple.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing with that idea.
Jesus was a rebel.
I like the idea that, and we'll discuss it towards the end, but it does make you think a little bit more about, I wonder what Jesus was like as a bloke, if we are to believe that he was a man.
Yeah. I mean, this is me getting into like the Trinity, which I don't really know much about. I was not raised with any kind of religion, so it's just something I know about. Christians believe that God exists in like three things, and one of them is the Father, which is like God, and one of them is the Son, which is like Jesus. But also Jesus was also a guy who did stuff, so he wasn't like some sort of ball of light zooming around and like making things the way it was supposed to be. So like he was a guy, but also he was God. So like, how do you kind of square that circle? And like the way they do it in this show is the idea that God and the plan is sort of, as he puts it, downloaded into Steve, and he needs to carry out that will. So like, he's a vessel for God, but he's also kind of separate to God in the way that everyone is, or no one is if God is everywhere. See, this is the thing. I don't know how. I just wasn't raised with this. I just believe in a pretty basic idea that, we probably have free will unless quantum mechanics proves that we don't, but let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
Well, as an ordained minister, I think you've got as far as I understand it, a good idea of the Trinity.
Yes, thank you. I'll need your on that.
Yeah, no, I did. I was watching it thinking I probably should have read the Bible as preparation, read the source material, and then gone in with a little bit more of a kind of informed opinion on what's being done.
But not all the books that Jesus threw out.
No, that's true.
No, we'll get to that later.
I like how in this cafe, in this conversation, we get the detail of there being, was it an extra gospel?
Yeah, it was like an extra gospel discovered at the sacking of Rome that had some numbers at the end that, if you decoded them, turned out to be a longitude and latitude system. So what that means is that also England winning enough wars to put the meridian in Greenwich was also like part of this kind of big divine plan prophecy. And it's like, hey, listen, in a 1,000 years, these numbers are going to make sense. You just have to wait for Britain to become far, far, far too powerful. Okay, once that happens, then the numbers will work as coordinates. It'll be the right meridian, and then you can find a guy in a hospital in Leeds, and it'll all be good.
I do like that they don't dwell on any of that for too long, because it's absolute nonsense. It is like probably the one angle of the show that is the most just kind of it exists because it feels like it has to, maybe to add a legitimacy.
Well, I mean, I know it didn't have to, because like it could just be that the Catholics don't show up and he does miracles and word gets out, Yeah. I mean, hell, what if this isn't even the second coming? What if this is like the sixth coming and there's one every like 400 years, but this is the first one to happen in the age of television and radio and all that stuff, I
was, I guess, enjoying the element of having the Catholic Church around as this presence, and I think I appreciated the conversation with Rory Kinnear enough that I was like, okay, well, you find a way to bring them into the story and get them believing early on rather than, having to see the miracles and things.
It's like, okay, cool, mysterious numbers, we good. Let's get back to sort of picking apart the idea of the show and the what ifs. And so they chat a bit. Steve is like, I'm gonna bring about something, but before that, I want one last night of normality, and then I'll become I'll do all the Son of God stuff, which is interesting. It's interesting that he knows that he can he's not going to like burst into a ball of light today. Like, he knows that if something big happens, it'll be tomorrow. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that whole concept of him kind of, I guess, downloading the information and treating it like that was really interesting. And this is... He
knows when things are going to happen, but he never knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. I was put in mind of Bruce Almighty, which was from the same year.
Oh, yeah.
Where Jim Carrey becomes an agent of God. And it's similar. He has he gets prayers sent to him through email, and it's able to manifest through that. And I think... It's just funny that kind of parallel.
I guess what's interesting
thought was happening there. That
Bruce Almighty was made by someone who believes all of that.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think we say it's sort of like Davis is an atheist, and we were kind of surprised that there was like no ambiguity. Like, this is the Son of God. That's what we're doing.
But then I think it's firmly an atheist view, because the next thing that Steve says to James, Rory Kinnear's character, is he points out how many priests are like shagging choir boys, and there's a clear...
So Rory Kinnear says that, like, do you think you can preach? Do you think you can get the message out? I'm a Catholic priest. We've been trying to do that for years. And then he's like, yeah, and you've been shagging choir boys for years, and he is not happy with that remark.
Even though RTD says unashamedly Christopher Eccleston's character is the Son of God, he is not trying to use Christianity to prove that Christianity is right in any way. If anything, he's using Christianity's own theology to point the finger at institutionalized Christianity. And I think that's why having the Catholic Church in this beginning bit is clever, because it easily solves the issue of, oh my gosh, you've just proved the Christians right. And instead it's going, actually, they're as bad as everyone else.
Yes. They're an institution.
So Steve goes out and he has his one night of freedom, and we very thoroughly see clearly that Judy doesn't believe any of it, and she does think that it's all just a load of bollocks that was hypothermia caused.
He apologises to his dad about like the police showing up and all that. He downs a pint. And also something else he does is he like smokes on this night out, which he normally never does.
You've got this beautiful scene of them walking down the street in the rain, and I like this because I like the idea of enjoying experience and the joy of just living your life. The idea that we have free will, and very often we don't use our own free will, because you wouldn't just jump on the top of a car. But Steve realizes he can, so he starts jumping on tops of cars.
Yeah.
And then I think we get our very first hint. Because so far, we've discussed so far that Steve is unashamed, is definitely the Son of God. I think you could still be skeptical so far.
Yeah, I think so.
We've not seen evidence. But then there's that moment where all the car alarms are going off because he's jumped on them. And then some guy comes out and tells him to stop it. And then all the car alarms stop. And the show doesn't draw attention to it. It just happens.
Oh, yeah.
Unless I made that up.
Yeah. I guess the other potentially divine thing is like, you can't survive 40 days on pork pies.
What?
Have you tried?
The amount of pork pies you could carry in your hands, right? He did not have a bag with him.
That's probably true.
But no, it is like, what if there was a prophecy and the Catholics just got really lucky?
Then I think, the next miracle is that a taxi shows up perfectly, just as Steve wants. And there's a great bit of humour where he just gets in the back of a taxi and leaves Judy behind and drives away.
Judy is kind of getting shafted right now. Like, we're going to see she's going to keep being in scenes where, Steve is not being holier than thou, but is certainly being a bit narcissistic. It's not very considerate.
It's the same motif from Bob and Rose of the taxis. So clearly it's a very RTD moment, and putting Leslie Sharp in the middle of this scene with her trying to get a taxi, unable to get a taxi.
Yeah, and like she's trying, she has to walk, and a homeless guy asks her for 20p and then heckles her quite aggressively, and then calls her Judith. It's like, come on, Judith. And it's like, oh my god, he knows her name. and then a woman has been driving around in circles and stops in her car and asks for directions to like a specific university building, and then she's like talking about like how she lost her husband to bowel cancer 6 months ago, and that it was 6 months of pain and wailing and shitting and blood and how horrible it is, and she's really getting worked up about it, and then she just drives off. And so like these are this is like where we start to see a motif, which is the demons, the people who come and sort of are trying to sow chaos and stuff. And the next night we do hear from Steve that he says, oh yeah, have you seen anyone acting weird, because like actually the demons will be out for you. It's like, well, if you knew the demons were going to be out for her, maybe you should have not driven off, not left her on her own. Come on.
I thought that was all very effectively done, all the kind of moments where people start saying things, and it's
oh yes, this scene is really spooky.
Yeah, it's there's something so uniquely unsettling about, like, I don't know, something that starts very ordinary, and it's a very relatable scenario that is then twisted, and they start going off script and saying things that people aren't meant to say in those circumstances. And I think that's a great level of unease that's created there.
It's something you'd see in like Doctor Who.
I've been trying not to say it, so
that was exactly what I was about to say. Yeah. I will just sit back and get back into my corner. The one thing I will say, and Joe, you'll probably be the expert. You're the movies guy. Is the poster in the bus shelter for Lord of the Rings?
I can't remember. It hadn't. Yeah, it hadn't. I don't know if I registered a poster that I can think of. I was paying attention to maybe literally everything else, but yeah.
The drama.
With a homeless guy, I was expecting a homeless guy to be God, because that's something they do, right? But actually that he's like possessed by a demon. Are we okay with that?
I think it's the first time that the show is showing us that one of its themes is what's a good person, and this 21st century idea of we all think we're good, or do we? But in actual fact, our goodness is very shallow.
Yeah. What if we're just comfortable?
Yeah, and it reminds me of a recurring story in Greek mythology of a god posing as a person in need. For instance, like an old woman who needs crossing a river, and a hero will carry her on her back, and then she'll reveal herself to be the goddess Athena and give you a reward, because it's all a test of will you give charity to those in need and prove your worth. That's
good, because sometimes that story, they turn out to be something bad. Like sometimes that's how the story goes. It goes the other way, and it's like, what is the lesson there? Like,
but I think Joe's hit the nail on the head there with the description of how this scene does it.
The devil seems to be sort of recruiting people in great despair.
Yeah.
So then Steve sends out a mass email with the subject the_2_coming to say the Son of God is back. Meet tonight at this stadium. The next day, Judy opens her door and Peter's there to say, we're going to do this thing, and she's understandably confused, and then we see that Steve is also there, and it turns out that a crowd of singing Christians, let's say, are all convening and going into this stadium at night, and she thinks it's like, this is ridiculous, and he's like, yeah, but like there's so many people here, why would they all be here if there wasn't something going on? She's like, these people will turn up for anything, which probably not far from the truth.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, I don't know whether this is just something that these people would, go to under any circumstances. Like, could you just get these gullible people?
I mean, what did he put in the email? Maybe he said, forward this email to 12 of your closest friends, or the devil will crawl out of your toilet and eat your face or something.
Yeah, I do like that. Steve calls them nutters. He's just like, these guys, they're not who we really need. They're just the first batch that will believe anything. But yeah, I think that's a nice kind of, it's that edge, that humor coming in, that humanity.
Yes.
But yeah, it did strike me as like, would these people, some, you get the sense some have traveled quite a distance to be there. It just feels like if you can get them there with an email, it might be a little convenient. Or these people have a lot of disposable income that they can just drop everything and pop to wherever they were.
I wonder if a lot of the themes that this episode covers felt very timely in 2024 to me. And I wonder if maybe this is a reach, but this idea of there's a certain group of people in society who, when hopeless, try and reach towards a figurehead. And as we approach July the 4th in the UK, and a general election and a certain group of certain people who lean towards nutters.
Oh my God, I just realised that our election is on America Day. What? How did that not click?
That's why I'll be voting for Barack Obama.
No, literally, Barack Obama, MP for Flydale North. Like, come on.
No, I wonder if... I don't think that's what this moment is trying to do, obviously, but I do wonder if it reflects that there are... I don't want to talk about people being stupid on a podcast that goes out online. But does what I'm saying make sort of vague sense?
Yeah, I think so.
It's okay. This is from 20 years ago. All these people are probably still alive, but they're not listening.
It's true. But there are people still alive today who I think are similar.
Yes, there are people alive today who remember 9/11.
Whoa.
So Judy is not having any of this. So she decides to leave, goes to their regular pub on the corner, and lo and behold, who does she see? It's Johnny Tyler.
Johnny.
Drinking by himself.
And she offers to buy him a pint, and like, I was just yelling at the screen, don't be nice to him. He called you a bitch. Reclaim the night, Judy. Come on.
There was part of me, though, that wanted the opposite and wanted her to buy him a drink and for him to apologise and realise that she was actually a good person. But unfortunately, it does not happen.
Yeah.
Because we see his eyes go all weird and realise that he's one of the monsters.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know if it's just that it's Mark Benton, isn't it? I don't know if it's just that he is just quite an inherently likable odd presence.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you do, I don't know, in both scenes, he for me just kind of he starts to win me over as just like, oh, this guy, you know. And then in both scenes, he spoils it once just by being sexist and once by being possessed or revealing himself to be
being possessed and sexist at the same time.
Yeah.
There's only one thing worse than a sexist. Boom. A possessed sexist. Yeah. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time an actor from episode 1 of Doctor Who was in this, you know, I'd have two.
Yeah.
I was genuinely sat there going, who's the second one?
It's Clive.
I'm being slow today. I only recognise Christopher Eccleston from the Big Finish audio in Doctor Adventures.
He sounds like Doctor Who.
Yeah, he'd appreciate that, Zach. He'd appreciate that a lot.
I also, whilst on this note, you know how the first season of Doctor Who was filmed and everyone says, oh, it had, like, they put Vaseline on the camera lens because it gives it this fuzzy look. I thought there was a similar level of fuzz in the cinematography in this episode, and also that some of the direction was odd throughout it.
I have a question about the whole Vaseline on lens things. Do you just put like the smallest bit and spread it around, or do you like put a clump?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a cinematographer. I'm not an expert.
Is it good for the lens, or is it just fine?
Can't imagine it's too bad for the lens. It's just, yeah. I did think early on it felt very kind of, you know, very ground level, very, you know, shaky through the club, and felt very dated in its depiction of kind of nightlife and things like that. But I don't know if that would have stood out as in any way odd at the time, or yeah. The demon eyes are interesting because the effect is quite fairly subtle. Like, I don't know if this is just because it's like a standard definition TV show, and so we just generally can't see a lot of detail. The eyes are a bit darker, but then they have like these spots of like white in them, as if like the light reflecting off. I don't know, I guess like cat eyes, maybe. Yeah.
But as I say, like, it's standard definition, so you just kind of make it out and you start to notice, oh yeah, the eyes are a bit messed up. The eyes do change a bit, you know. I
thought the subtlety of that was really good, because there are times where eyes in the show and just in general kind of look like that anyway. If they're reflecting a certain, you know, if there's a light, then you can get the kind of light spots in there.
Exactly.
And it's a case of like, sometimes you're looking at someone like, maybe that's just what eyes look like, and then it's like, no, hang on, that is weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, you kind of second guess yourself.
No, they don't grow little horns and a goat's tail or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, if you were in the moment, like Judy, experiencing that, you may not immediately go, oh, hang on, something dreadful's happening here. You would just go kind of, I feel weird about all this.
No, exactly. Whilst we're on the topic of cinematography, sorry to derail the discussion of the plot again, I think the colour palette, you saying whether or not the cinematography might stand out, Joe, I think compared to Bob Rose and Queer as Folk, the previous two RTD projects, this has got a very dark and, I want to say, bland, like it's very muted tones. That they don't. This doesn't uplift you.
No,
the look and the feel. We were talking about Manchester. For context, I'm on the podcast resident Mancunian, Christopher Eccleston in real life is from Salford, and the character of Steve's also from Salford. So it's that gritty. It's the north of the north. Whereas so far we've seen characters living in Withington, Whalley Range. That's South Manchester. South Manchester's always been thought of as slightly posher than North Manchester. So this is the grittier side of Manchester.
And which one do you live in?
I live in South Manchester.
Actually, yeah, because like Bob and Rose was set quite a lot in South Manchester, as was Queer as Folk as well. Like
South Manchester, and then of course Canal Street, which is right in the centre of Manchester, and of course is a hive of colour. Especially at the moment, I was there last week because I'm putting a play on there next week. At the moment, obviously, because it's Pride Month, Pride flags everywhere. But right in the middle, they've got the leather Pride, like the leather kink Pride flag.
yes,
Which I had to literally get onto sort of like Pride flag wiki and try and find my spotter's guide.
no, that's one of like the oldest ones. Like the flags used to be like the rainbow, the big old gay and queer flag, and then it would be the different sort of more like tribes, like you'd have like the lesbians and the bears. And it's interesting about now, sort of when people think of flags, they generally think of more identity flags. Those seem to have sort of overtaken them in like sort of cultural capital. So yeah, that's a bit of your history, Zach.
But we're here in gritty Salford, and we're going to a gritty Salford football stadium.
Yes,
not Old Trafford, obviously.
no.
And the police are cottoned on that something's going on, and all these people get shepherded in. I think it's really cool and it drives home that fact that we were talking about before, that Steve doesn't quite know what he's doing, and that he turns up and he's kind of like, I don't really know what I'm doing. But I really like the fact that he makes Pete, his pseudo-disciple friend, an integral part of the miracle by looking in his pocket, finding the sunglasses, and then making the sunglasses make him realise, I'm about to make this whole thing flood with daylight. And that's where we get the miracle.
It's funny, I was thinking, is it going to be like daytime inside the stadium and nighttime outside? And so it's a bit of a you kind of have to be there thing. But no, actually, we get a big Minecraft beacon of daylight radiating out of the stadium, or the beacon from Heroes Duty and Wreck-It Ralph. It reminded me of that. Everyone around comes out and looks at it because, now there's this big column of light in the sky. And so everyone runs out the pub. Johnny, so at this point, Johnny has been kicked out the pub because when he was all creepy and possessed and sexist at Judy, she panicked, and then the barman, good on him, was like, you need to leave right fucking now. And so, and as he left, he squeezed in one last sexist remark of, like a good shag or whatever would sort her out. One of those kind of very, very, very unoriginal sexism. Like if you're gonna be a piece of shit, at least come up with some new material. But anyway, he steps out of his home. Everyone steps out of their homes, and they're all looking and they're all filming it. And apparently, like 2,000 people filmed it because this gets on the news, and then we find out sort of the scale of this and how it definitely happened because like a NASA satellite saw it, and the whole thing lasted all the way until morning. And so it's like, okay, so like this is real. This is a show about the thing actually happening and not just a guy thinking it's happening.
I thought it was a really great decision to have that be the miracle, because it's like it's not particularly flashy or showy or kind of, it's not an incredible VFX bit of, no,
I was wondering how they filmed it. I was wondering how they made it day when they filmed it at night. I was wondering how they did that.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out as well. It's like, but you'd imagine, and this could be complete ignorance on my part, you'd imagine it would be a fairly simple thing, as far as it's not too hard to light a scene to look lighter than it is, or to do that. But it wasn't, it's not like he makes, a big pillar of fire or something, or, makes shapes out of water or something that's a little flashier. It's literally something it's light. It's this kind of very pure thing. It's just taken out of its right context. And I think that was a really effective thing of just like, it's not overdoing it in the big, he reveals himself scene. I think if this were a Hollywood movie, something more flashy would happen and it would work less well, I think.
And Judy, alone in a pub, turns on the TV, and there's already cameras down there, so she sees Steve preaching and being like, I am the Son of God, I have a message, this is my deal, this is what I'm trying to do. Yeah, and then this does transition quite well into the it's just such an RTD thing to like get actual newsreaders to like be in the show.
Yeah, I thought that.
And then there's world newsreaders.
I was crossing my fingers to see Trinity Wells from Doctor Who as the American newsreader. I was like, has he done this? Is this something that covers all his shows? But you could just easily slot that in, I think.
Yeah.
And it just feels very much like a Doctor Who episode moment where you really drive home that this is happening to real people and it's on telly. It's Russell Television Davies going, this is how things are real.
Yeah. They also report that, like, the guy Stephen Baxter, that's his surname, so let's see if that has any significance, any symbolism there. We've learned that, he has no qualifications and his dad was in prison for 6 months, and sort of, you really get the sense that, like, this is like an ordinary no one who is now the son of God. Damn, that's crazy. Anyway, we ended up talking about this for way longer than expected, so join us next week for the rest of our discussion with Joe Brennan.